Hello everyone, today I'm going to be explaining the fifth dimension in Windows Paint because I do not know how to animate. Let's start with the zeroth dimension though, because you kind of need to understand the first four dimensions before you're going to be able to grasp the fifth dimension, and I'll try to keep this as simple as possible so not only physics majors and absolute science geeks can understand. The zeroth dimension is basically just a dot. It has no upness, no downness, no leftness, no rightness. It has no measurable direction at all. A actual zeroth dimensional object would basically just be the smallest possible particle ever. Currently, the smallest particles we know of are things like quarks, which make up protons and neutrons, which then make up atoms. But there might even be particles smaller than quarks that we just simply cannot measure. And by definition, the smallest possible object, a zeroth dimensional object, would be immeasurable because it has, again, no measurable attributes in any direction. Now, moving on, we have the first dimension. It is actually a lot closer to the zeroth dimension than you might think because it is just a line, except its width, its thickness, its up and down in this example that I've given is the exact same as all dimensions in a zero-dimensional object. So if you look here, or actually I'll put a D here, first dimension, this dot has no measurable direction in any way, the same way that this line has no measurable direction in the up and down direction. So you can only go back and forward. That's the only directions in a one-dimensional world, and is a perfect line with a width of 0 dimensions. Now, moving on to the second dimension. The second dimension, it'll start to be a lot simpler, just looks like a square. But yet again, now we're adding in, there's a third direction here. There is into the screen and out of the screen. And that direction, again, has the exact same width as a zero-dimensional object. It has no measurable inness or outness of the screen. It is a perfectly flat square. You can measure how much up and down it is, and how right and left it goes. Like you can say this is, 1 inch, and this is also 1 inch or something like that. But again, it has no measurement in or out of the screen at all, by definition, which a lot of people picture a 2D object as like a piece of paper. But a piece of paper still has a really tiny little bit of width, so it is still technically a three-dimensional object. Now, a three-dimensional object, this should be the simplest, so I'm going to spend the least time on it, is like a cube, which is the easiest to understand because we interact in singular moments with 3D objects all the time. How we see the world is in 3 dimensions, where we have now into the screen and out of the screen as a direction, as well as the up and down and left and right that we saw in the 2 dimensions. I won't really explain this anymore because basically every object you've ever touched or seen is 3-dimensional. But in real life, technically, those objects that we think is 3-dimensional are really also existing in the 4th dimension, which you've probably heard before as time, which confuses a lot of people who are not very interested in science or physics, but really it's a lot simpler than it sounds. It's basically like if you put our 3-dimensional object, like this cube here, on a number line. So you can just think of where it's at as, 0, and then over here is like 10 or -10, just like a number line. And this is the number line of time. And then the directions on this number line, again, because it's only one additional dimension, we only have the future and the past. Future and past. So basically, our actual 3D objects, ourselves, us and our 3-dimensional beings, are really also existing in the 4th dimension. We are moving towards the future at all times at a very consistent speed. Technically, we could theoretically change this speed, but that is a bit more complicated. A four-dimensional object, or that is fully in control of the fourth dimension, would be able to move at any speed it would like in both the past and future directions, basically being a time traveler. Now, if you think of time as a direction, which I think a lot of people don't explain very well, this is actually very simple. Think of yourself moving forward or backwards. You can choose to take a step forward and then stop and not move, and then choose to take a step back. Just like a fourth dimensional object can take a step into the future, and then it could run into the future, it could speed up that process, and then it could stop moving through time, become kind of a timeless object for a moment, and then move back towards the past at basically any speed it would like. So that's exactly how a fourth dimensional object works, and we are traveling through the fourth dimension. We are traveling towards the future, we just do not control the dimension, which kind of adds that confusion into it, which a lot of people don't explain very well. Now, moving on to the fifth dimension, there's kind of two different ways to look about it. We could look at it from what does the fifth dimension look like to us, which is a 3D viewer, our worlds, how we view the world is in 3Ds, or what does this look like to us, or what do we look like to it? I'm going to start with what does it look like to us, because that's actually a lot simpler. A fifth dimensional object, which is 2 dimensions higher, is the same as what a 2-dimensional world would see a 4-dimensional object look like, which is also 2 dimensions higher. So what this person, let's make a 2-dimensional character right here. Let's just call him, I don't know, Bob. We have little flat Bob in his 2 dimensions. He is very happy. When he looks at a 4-dimensional object, he would see the same thing that we see to a 5th-dimensional object, because again, there is a 2-dimension difference. And as we already explained, the 4th dimension and the 2nd dimension, the 4th dimension would look like a moving cube that could basically move through time at any speed it would like. So let's say we have a cube here, and this cube is going to travel in towards and through this sheet, this 2-dimensional sheet, this 2-dimensional world. So it's coming out of the screen through this sheet. What Bob would see here is a little green edge. He would see this edge come and then suddenly pop up. So he would see basically a line or a square. And then as it moves through, he would continuously see a square being made throughout the middle of this 3-dimensional object. So it would look like suddenly a square that would appear and then disappear. And if we brought it down to a point, so if we started at a point like a triangle kind of, or like a pyramid, think of a pyramid like this. I'll just draw it out the normal direction so it's a little bit easier to see. What it would look like a point to him that would suddenly grow and grow and grow into a bigger and bigger square as it moved down through his world. It would start at this point, and then it would become like a square, and bigger and bigger and bigger, and then once it became a big square, suddenly, once it became all the way to this size of a square, it would just disappear. So to us, what a 5D object would look like is like a cube that started as a really tiny square and then became a little cube, just like this started as a dot. This 4D object going through a 2D plane would look like a little square and then would become a little cube, and then this cube would grow and grow and grow and grow as it's traveling through our 3-dimensional world, and then suddenly it would just disappear and would leave nothing behind, not even that dot I just drew there. So it would get bigger and bigger and then disappear. So that's what a 5D object would look like. But that's not a very good explanation, because this is just a growing 3D object, which isn't actually what a 5D object looks like. So if I erase this, now let's see what we look like from the 5D perspective to kind of fully understand what it really means to be 5th dimensional. Let me just erase the rest of this stuff here to make some more room to work with. So what we look like to a 5th dimensional object is we look like the center of a cylinder. Its existence would look kind of like this. Oh, why is this so thin suddenly? Let me just thicken this up. Yeah, there. Okay. It would look, let me make this a little bit bigger. So just think of this cylinder as going down past the screen. We would look like a little cube right here. And this is you, or whatever you want to picture, in a 5D world. This cylinder is the 5D world. Now, what it has as an option, a 5D object, instead of, it would function like a 3D object, it would be here, except now it can move in the 4th dimension, which is this direction, time, so this would be the future, and this would be the past. So this would be a 4D object in a 5D world, would kind of look like this. But a 5D object in a 5D world would have more than just the future and the past. It would have, as well, a lot of different options. It would have all these choices. And you could actually keep splitting this cylinder up infinitely many times. Once you hit infinitely many slices, these each are another universe that this object can choose to enter. Now, what it can do is, if it makes a decision, just like you make decisions, let's say this morning you decided to get tea instead of coffee, one of those universes would be right here. Right here is a 3D universe traveling into the future. Let me write that a little bit bigger. It's hard to see, but just picture this into the future. And then right here is the universe where, no, never mind, you decided to get coffee. So this is another 3-dimensional universe traveling into the future. And again, it could go back into the past before it made this decision, back into the center of this option wheel that it has. Then over here, you decide to drink nothing. So another 3D universe going towards the future that, again, it can reverse back to this choice. So it's basically a infinitely many wheel of 3D options, each flowing outwards, out of the cylinder, towards the future. And what a 5D object would see is it would be surrounded by 3D worlds of different options it can make. But instead of being forced, once you choose to drink coffee, you can't go back and say, never mind, I don't want to drink coffee. What a 5G object has the privilege of doing is it can say, okay, I want to drink coffee, which was this dimension actually, I think, and then it can go into the future, and then way later, it can decide, you know what, I didn't actually want to drink coffee. Let me go back and choose a different universe. Let's go over here where I drink nothing, and then go into the future here. And then right as it enters, this is the last, the most complicated part of explaining the 5th dimension, is right as the 5th dimensional object makes any decision at all, which includes moving one atom to the left, moving one atom up, all the simplest decisions possible, each have their own universe. The moment it enters that universe, it gets a new wheel. So let's put a little circle here. This circle, which it just enters, is a whole new cylinder, each with infinitely many more options for it to choose from. So basically, a 5th dimensional object can pick any choice that is theoretically possible. Any movement of any atom would change and create a new universe that it can choose to exist in, and then can go in and throughout all of those existences as freely as it wants, each of those existences being another 3-dimensional world. So hopefully that made sense, and that's basically the end of this video. So see you in the next one.